I don't think that there has or probably ever will be a Godzilla movie that has been more hated than Godzilla the Planet Eater. The film was announced as soon as City on the Edge of Battle was released, and needless to say, the reaction to that film was a tad negative. With a distinct lack of Mechagodzilla, or more accurately the form he was presented in, all hype immediately went towards Godzilla King of the Monsters. And that was unfortunately where the Planet Eater was, always overshadowed by its Hollywood brother. But now, the Planet Eater has a chance to shine now that it's officially been released on Netflix. And as per usual with these movies, nobody likes it. What a surprise. But if you know me, as per usual is not my forte. So based off that, you can probably imagine that I liked Godzilla the Planet Eater. And that I did. So let's get right into this robot and talk about the end of the Godzilla anime trilogy. So you know how I thought City on the Edge of Battle was a pretty good Godzilla movie that not only improved on what I liked from its predecessor, but also gave us some new interesting themes that Godzilla movies haven't tackled before? Yeah, apply all of that to this movie. If you know me, chances are you already know what I like. The animation, music, yada yada yada. The character animation is very nice and brings out a lot of different emotions. And then as usual, the backgrounds just look great. Once again, the music is done by Takayuki Hattori, who, just like his scores for Monster Planet and City, did an amazing job. All of the themes, old and new, are great to listen to. Godzilla's theme, Ghidorah's theme, Medphyse's theme, the ending theme, Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, all of them are great. But the best part of the movie without a doubt is its character development, especially with the main protagonist. Someone tell me how Haruo became such a good character? He was kinda bland in Monster Planet, not really doing much other than being Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan, except he yells bastard a lot more. In City, he was basically the same character, but the last 45 minutes really set this character on a good path. And then Planet Eater follows it up, and he's just so great in it. A big problem with Haruo in City is that despite the terrible failure that was the escape attempt from Godzilla Earth, nobody really goes against him as a result. In this film though, an entire subplot is dedicated to the falling out between the humans and Bill Saludo because of Haruo's actions in Mechagodzilla City. It's not exactly any better on Earth either. With most of humanity joining Medphyse's death cult, Haruo for the most part has hardly anyone to talk to outside of Martin or the Hotawa twins. And when he does get a chance to talk to someone outside of those three, primarily Medphyse, it's at his most sneaky and cunning. Haruo, much like the last movie, is also put in pretty tough positions, and that's the decision to bring Ghidorah to Earth or not, and this causes him to kill Medphyse in one of the most emotionally heavy scenes in this entire trilogy. Yuko be damned. I don't want to talk too much about the ending right now, but I do think it does make sense for his character to do what he did, especially after the events of this movie. I think it's needless to say that Haruo is my favorite protagonist from the modern era of Godzilla movies, and in this film especially, he has without a doubt cemented that spot at the very top. While Haruo may be the standout of this movie, he isn't the only good character in it. Martin has become a lot more likable in his two previous appearances, mainly because he actually has a personality outside of the exposition tool, and the Hotawa twins Mayana and Miana are also nice. Surprisingly though, the character who I have the most problems with is Medphyse of all people. Medphyse has always been my favorite in the trilogy. He was both mysterious and intriguing, and where everyone else stuck beside Haruo because he was the leader, or in Yuko's case a love interest, Medphyse seemed to be the only person who genuinely cared for Haruo. He was Haruo's right-hand man. Here, however, he only really wants Haruo around so he could be a sacrifice to Ghidorah. On one hand, I like this change in character. Medphyse works wonderfully as an antagonist, and he's probably the best human villain that we've gotten in a Godzilla movie since X from Final Wars. He's both very calm and menacing, which makes for an unpredictable and scary villain. But at the same time, his ideology is kinda dumb. Okay, time for context. Medphyse's plan is to persuade Haruo to have him be the last sacrifice to Ghidorah because Haruo's will to act upon taking on the creature he hates the most, Godzilla, acts as fuel to bring Ghidorah to Earth. Alright, that's a pretty simple motivation. The problem is that we're talking about Haruo, aka the person who, in this trilogy, is as stubborn as a pissed off mule. So of course he won't go along with it, and this is where I raise a pretty neat question. Why doesn't Medphyse just have himself as the sacrifice? He clearly has the will to act if the entire trilogy is anything to go by, and if he believes that being eaten by Ghidorah is the only way to salvation, then wouldn't it make sense that he'd be willing to be eaten by Ghidorah? I think the writers made it this way because they wanted to show that Haruo is in the right, but the thing is, Medphyse should have some ground in this argument too. I'm gonna get to this sometime in the future, but if you want to have a villain be somewhat of a decent threat, then they need to have their side of the argument be just as strong as the heroes. And don't get me wrong, Medphyse is a good antagonist aside from that. His will to act for sure makes him a very threatening figure, but ultimately he just falls flat when it comes to his motivation. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time we talk about the title character. Okay, the other title character. The Planet Eater himself, King Ghidorah. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't like Anime Godzilla all that much when I saw it on that poster. I mean, really? 3 giant snakes? But after the movie came out, I love it. Granted, the design is still something very drastic and different from any other previous Ghidorahs, but like the previous 2 members of the Big 5 in the trilogy, the way Ghidorah has been implemented makes him completely different and something we've never seen before. If there's one phrase that can be used to describe Anime Ghidorah, it would be terrifyingly bizarre. The fact that he is from another dimension this time means that his entire existence in our world means logic is bent completely backwards. Ghidorah can distort space and time so that incoming messages aboard the Aratrum are received out of order. He can pass through Godzilla's shield without even breaking a sweat, not to mention that Godzilla or technology can pick him up, basically leaving him to be a ghost. Not to mention his introduction scene is incredible. Shadow snaking around the Death Cult followers and chopping off their limbs makes for a creepy and haunting image. This Ghidorah is probably the scariest creature in the entire Godzilla series since Burning Godzilla. This Lovecraftian horror of a Ghidorah is threatening and godly, making for a terrifying new incarnation of the 3-headed monster. And while we're still on the topic of Ghidorah, let's talk about his fight with Godzilla Earth. It's kinda lame, but it actually starts off pretty dang good. As Ghidorah destroys the Aratrum, storm clouds form over Earth as Godzilla wakes up and leaves Mount Fuji to face off this new threat. Ghidorah then proceeds to descend from the skies like the dope-nope rope he is. And of course, Godzilla, being the aggressor that he is, charges up a beam, shoots it, and of course, tethered to his own dimension's laws, Ghidorah snakes his way around Godzilla and proceeds to bite down upon the Monster King's shoulder. And soon the other 2 heads make their appearances out of 2 other portals in the sky, which also bite Godzilla. And that's it really. Godzilla and Ghidorah remain basically motionless for the entire fight, with Godzilla roaring and smacking every 2 minutes so that nobody falls asleep while watching it. What adds even more salt to the wound is that this fight cuts in and out of the psychological brawl between Haruo and Metphis, which is way more interesting than this. I get why the fight is so uneventful, because the anime films aren't about kaiju fights and they have less of a budget than the average Godzilla fan film, but you couldn't have made the fight a little more interesting? A low budget hasn't stopped other series from being crazy stylistic and cool. Just look at the last couple of episodes of Evangelion as an example of creating something cool without a high budget. Do something like that. Have Ghidorah pull Godzilla into his dimension and then the fight could be done in like pencil drawings. It'd be weird for sure, but I dig it. It's only really until the end where the fight actually gets interesting again. So Haruo breaks the stone that Metphis has in his eye, which, by the way, Metphis has one of his eyes replaced with a little stone with the exif symbol that allows Ghidorah to have his physics in our reality. Then Ghidorah becomes physical and Godzilla defeats Ghidorah. Like, unbelievably easy. This lad gets absolutely clapped. Godzilla smacks one head into the ground, boom. Rips off another one's jaw, boom. Shoots his beam at the last head, boom. Then he proceeds to destroy all the other black holes and then the fight is over. Metphis is gone and that's it. Except it isn't. There's still 10 more minutes to go, and these are 10 minutes that I really liked. After a montage with some pretty neat visuals and a nice song that shows all of the remaining humans integrating with the Hotua society, we soon learn thanks to Martin that the last remaining vulture can be activated and that the remaining nanometal can be used to build an entirely new civilization. After this revelation, Haruo then has a vision that tells him that if civilization were to advance, Ghidorah would inevitably return. So, he takes Yuko, gets into a vulture, and yeets himself into Godzilla, who destroys the vulture with an atomic blast. Then we cut to some flowers, and then the movie ends. I think the ending is very well done, and aside from Ghidorah's introduction, probably my favorite part. I think that Haruo's decision by the film's end makes sense for him as a character, especially after what he has learned to the movie thanks to Metphis. To put it simply, if he kills himself, and his hatred along with it, Ghidorah would cease his impending return. I might go into this ending more sometime in the future, but all you really need to know is that I like it. And that's basically the best way to sum up the entirety of Godzilla the Planet Eater. I like it. While the movie generally has some issues, it does have some pretty great moments as well. As for ranking this movie within the trilogy, that's a little complicated. I would probably put it as the same level as City, but I can't really say that it's the best of the trilogy as most people say it is. I'm gonna give Godzilla the Planet Eater a solid 7 out of 10. As for the entire trilogy, that's a separate beast that I'll be covering within the coming months, so stay tuned for that. But these are just my thoughts, and I want to know, what did you guys think of Godzilla the Planet Eater? Do you think it was good, trash, or somewhere between? Either way, I am Sam the Giganfan, reminding you all to wash your hands.